by Representative Francesca Hong.
Good
Representative Hong,
morning.
thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I wanted to start just with your reaction to what the Joint Finance Committee did last week. And I hate calling it the Joint Finance Committee. It's not joint. It's overwhelmingly Republican, and the Republicans just do what they want to do. There's no bipartisanship whatsoever there. Tell me about your reaction.
It's no surprise at this point the Republicans have absolutely no interest in actually meeting the needs of their communities, let alone listening to their constituents. So when they voted out 612 of the governor's proposal, everything from healthy school meals for all to eliminating lead out of our waters, other environmental protections, legalizing cannabis, fully funding our public schools. This is now the fourth budget where they've just not even brought any of those proposals up for debate. They're starting at what we call back to base. And, even though thousands of Wisconsinites showed up at these listening sessions to tell those folks to their face what they needed for their communities, Marklein and Bourne decided, nah, we're just going to do the bidding of Robin Voss again.
It makes a mockery of so-called listening sessions there if they're just not going to listen at all.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Waste of folks' time.
Yeah. I want people to, if you're listening and you want to let your legislator know, Representative Francesca Hong just mentioned Senator Marklein. Here's his email, SEN period for Senator, Marklein, MARKLEIN. That's sen.marklein at legis for legislature, legis.wi.gov. I'm going to give it to you once more. sen.marklein at legis.wi.gov. And you can do the same thing for Bourne. sen.bourne at legis.wi.
Oh, Bourne is a assembly person, so it's rep.born.
There you go. So that would be rep.bourne at legis.wi.gov. Give them an earful. It's just disgraceful what they did at the so-called Joint Finance Committee last week.
And if you feel like heading out to the Spring Green area or Beaver Dam, there are folks in those communities who representative and their senator are not listening to them. So I think it's important that someone goes out and lets them know that there's a lot of issues Wisconsinites connect on, childcare especially being one of them. And I know for Senator Marklein, he's been getting an earful about that for years and has done nothing.
And there was a public hearing or there was a meeting that he was invited to, a public meeting in New Glarus earlier this week. We had a child care provider, Corinne Hendrickson, who had invited him to come to that, and he just didn't show. It's right in his district.
Yep, it's really disgraceful. And child care workers, at this point, they are asking for the $13 an hour that was funded through the Child Care Account program. That's where we are. Child care, it's part of infrastructure, childcare, anything in the care economy, paid leave, caregiving work, long-term care. These are things that are absolutely disintegrating. And if we don't invest in these people now who are so willing to do care work, it's a future that I really don't think any of us want to be a part of.
I mean, it's amazing. These are the people who are taking care of our kids and taking care of our elderly parents or grandparents, and they're the least remunerated people in our economy. And yet the Republicans at the so-called Joint Finance Committee were not able to sustain the child care industry in the way they need it. And Representative Hong, you're a small business owner. You know how hard it is to keep the doors open. And for child care providers, according to the study that they presented, they're going to lose up to a quarter to a third of every child care business in Wisconsin if this funding is not restored. I mean, that's just a horrible consequence of these savage cuts.
Absolutely. I mean, parents are going to lose care, providers are going to lose businesses, child care workers and educators are going to lose their jobs. But I mean, it's ultimately, we all have to care about our kids. I wonder who is going to take care of Senator Marklein and Mark Bourne. You know, if
Mm.
our care facilities close, if we don't have childcare centers and parents and care providers aren't able to go to work, it's already incredibly difficult right now to be making a living wage and getting by. And we should be a state where people have opportunity to thrive, not struggling to survive.
So thinking about like how you organize in this like political climate, right? This isn't your first rodeo. You've been dealing with, some of your colleagues across the aisle for years now. And we had State Rep Christian Phelps on earlier in the week, and I asked a similar question I want to pose to you, and I think it tees up for something else I want to mention, is how do you all like organize understanding these? And I say organize, I don't use that term with every elected official, but you are an organizer and like how you show up and whatnot too. How do you all like navigate this moment, understanding the political climate, and how are we able to bring folks together? And I also want to leave space to talk about some news from earlier this month that involved you and one of the things that you helped start at the legislature, but how you all see like different ways of tools to be able to combat this political environment we're in.
I think every elected official needs to be an organizer. And one of the first
Facts.
things that makes a great organizer is one, you leave your insecurities at the door, and two, you actively listen. I think it's the
Mm,
first step in organizing is that you have to meet the folks whose lived experiences are most impacted by policy and oftentimes, too often, power and corruption that's happening at the government level. And so organizing requires leaving your ego at the door, actively listening to the needs of your communities, and then really assessing how the team that you're working in, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and who is best suited to go have really meaningful conversations to build trusted relationships. Because people right now have no reason to trust politicians. I mean, truly. And so, how do we make sure that we are surrounding ourselves with people who are willing to open up conversations about, hey, these are policy decisions. The reason your schools are struggling and you're having to go to referenda, and this was over 421 referenda that were put up for votes back in 2024. These are why these things are happening. Identify some of the villains and really, share the power. It's not just necessarily about empowering, but how do you provide opportunities for other folks to really be the community leaders that they are and help you organize.
mm,
And I think, especially right now, Representative Phelps and I are really fortunate that we have amazing community organizers who have chosen to trust us to bear the burden and responsibility of having to say what's going on in the legislature when people, rightfully so, may not choose to tune out. And so I think it's back to basics when I think about how we organize in this moment as
mm.
legislators. And it's really providing spaces for other folks to lead and then making sure that they have, the knowledge about what Robin Voss is doing, how to identify that villain, what some of the things we can do in our community while we try to build power in the Capitol and take care of one another. So that's what I'm encouraging a lot of members to think about. It's just a lot when you also have, fascists at your door and looking at you in your face, telling you, don't go back to your community with anything.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned talking about folks with lived experiences, and I really want to lift up because I am proud, although I think it's long overdue. And congratulations that earlier this month, there is now an Asian caucus at the legislature. And I think that's really important because I have an article pulled up. Being the first means nothing if you're the last, right? And when you were the first Asian state rep in Wisconsin, just it feels like not that long ago, right? And then now there's enough to be able to have a caucus. And I bring this up because I do think that it's part of the organizing that you're talking about centering people's lived experiences and centering community experiences. So I just wanted to give you a moment to one, give you your flowers for being able to help bring folks together and be able to have this caucus, but also your vision and how do you think this kind of plays into being able to build as well?
Well, I really appreciate that. Yes, we just need 2 people to create a caucus in the legislature. So when Representative Renuka Mayadev here in my neighboring district in Madison and Representative Angelito Tenorio, who represents the West Allis area, were elected, just personally, I felt this immense sense of relief and pride. We often, as leaders of color, we get pulled in a lot of directions. You're ripe for disappointment, and one of the worst things, is disappointing your communities. And when there are fewer of us or only one of us, trying to figure out how best to uplift the diversity of your community. The Asian community is one of the most diverse diasporas. It's a lot of pressure. And so personally, to have Renuka and Angelito with me there, I think is only going to make me a better legislator. And in terms of more than representation, right? It's not enough just to have folks who may look like you in the halls of power. It's really about, again, how do we share the power that we have, and how do we create platforms for folks not necessarily to have us be their voice, but for folks to be able to bring their voice to spaces of influence. And really, we have a responsibility to make government accessible, right? So for folks who, I think each of us has to make ourselves more accessible than other representatives, because people for the first time maybe, learning about the state legislature, what it does, how to get engaged and be a part of a state government that is supposed to be working for them.
You talk about accessibility. A lot of Republican legislators, certainly in Congress, aren't accessible at all. Of not doing town halls anymore, not meeting their constituents. Van Orden's not doing it in his district, and then you have folks in the legislature like Senator Marklein that we talked about a second ago, not meeting with his constituents, and it's not the first time either. I mean, when they were shutting down UW Richland Center. I know Todd Albaugh on the Todd Albaugh show really reported this out better than anybody, and was calling out Marklein almost every day for not showing up, not being responsible, not exercising power. I mean, he's one of the chairs of Joint Finance. He could have saved that institution if he wanted to, and he failed, and he's not meeting his constituents. I mean, what do you tell people who are living in districts where their elected officials aren't accessible?
I was in Wautoma and Green Lake over the weekend, and I have to tell you, rural organizers are exceptional, and they are showing up in hundreds, and they don't care if their Republican representative or senator is not there. They are there to share stories. They are there to affirm their neighbors' struggles, but also work together to try to figure out, how do we get to Madison and hold these folks accountable at their doorstep. And so I think those folks, I tell them, look to your community.
That's good advice. Please stay with us for the next segment. I want to hear from you, Representative Hong, about the Economic Bill of Rights.
Yes.
We'll be right back on Mornings with Pat Kreitlow. Hey, we're back on Mornings with Pat Kreitlow. I'm Matt Rothschild, joined by Angela Lang, my co-host of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and today. It's been a fun 4 days here filling in for Pat. I hope you've enjoyed it too. If you're listening, 855-752-4842. And we're thrilled to have State Representative Francesca Hong still with us for the rest of this half hour. Representative Hong, in the last couple sessions, you've been introducing a bill called the Economic Bill of Rights. Talk about that.
Yes, so stoked that Representative Tenorio and the fellow members in my Democratic Socialist Caucus and I, as well as our Democratic colleagues, introduced the Economic Justice Bill of Rights. So this is actually Assembly Joint Resolution 33. And it's a set of 10 tenets that we believe every single Wisconsinite should have their government provide, so that they have the agency and the opportunity to have economic security, because it's economic security that provides folks freedom, that provides folks safety, and allows them to care for themselves and care for others. So these are things like a right to a living wage, a right to collectively bargain and form a union, a right to a retirement, accessible childcare, high quality public education. I mean, these are things that, almost all Wisconsinites can agree are good things to provide folks so that they can create opportunity for themselves.
So if all Wisconsinites probably agree that these are simple, standard, basic things, how come it hasn't been passed yet? Like what are, and I hate to give space, but um I think it's important to name, and we've talked about this with Rep Phelps, of that, they don't like to hold hearings because they don't want to go on record to say why, right? But I'm curious, your conversations, it can't just be a financial thing because that doesn't make sense. Paint a picture of these villains that you had mentioned, right? And why they are so opposed to basic worker rights and decency for Wisconsinites.
Well, because they're cowards in addition to being villains, right?
Ooh.
I think it's important to recognize that a lot of them aren't, acting on their own. Whether you're beholden to the donors that not just give to your campaign, but the campaigns that are financing your um, uh, the campaigns that are financing your campaigns, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the darker money side, Speaker Voss has immense power and influence over how each of his member acts. And I think a lot of it comes down to they truly believe Wisconsinites are not united with shared values. They want to divide us. I still believe that's why they didn't want trains. They don't want folks from different zip codes to come together, have conversation, break bread, and realize that, oh, if we all had good public schools, that would probably be good for all of our communities. You're struggling with housing costs. I'm struggling with housing costs too. I would like more small businesses, independent businesses on my main streets. We would love to keep more of those open too. So when the strategy is divide and conquer, the last thing you want to do is talk about what all Wisconsinites want. And then when someone confronts you about it, it's easy to blame the Democrats, right? When we do not have the majority nor the actual power to pass legislation on our own, let alone choose which bills get a public hearing for debate. And so that coward part not only comes from ignoring their constituents and ignoring and refusing to debate, but also not recognizing that you're ignoring your own power. You can make different decisions. You can organize your caucus to act differently. You choose not to even try, and then you're going to be a mouthpiece for the speaker. They're the ones who are lacking dignity and thus want to strip it from the rest of Wisconsinites.
And Representative Hong, one of the reasons the speaker has so much power over other Republicans there is a campaign finance problem, because they rewrote the campaign finance law in 2015 to allow legislative campaign committees run by the speaker and the majority and minority leaders to collect unlimited donations from people. There used to be a limit as to what people could give to these committees, and now there's no limit. And so the speaker's able to raise unlimited amounts of money. And so if you're a Republican and disobeying what the speaker says, he's going to say, hey, I've got a couple $1,000,000 here in my pocket. I can primary you and you're going to be dead. Isn't that what's going on too?
Well, and they get a discount, right? When they have the gerrymandered maps, like folks really didn't have to do anything, which is why it's wild that they have the audacity to judge and make decisions about work requirements for folks in transition for their benefits, to blame Wisconsinites for not being hardworking when one of our strongest values is that we all work hard. And I'll also just mention that we can be passing different types of campaign finance laws. We need more working people, single moms, bartenders, organizers, educators, to be able to run for office, but that takes money. You're putting your life on hold to go talk to your communities. We can have policies that help cover living expenses while you're campaigning. It's beautiful to see people come together and offer to mow your lawn or take care of your kid while you're campaigning, but that should actually be part of the process to make our democracy actually stronger by having working people actually have the opportunities to be able to run for office and it be sustainable. Because a lot of them are like, we're asking people to sacrifice probably much like higher paid work, higher paying jobs in the private sector to come deal with Robin Voss for like $55,000 a year, right? Like
I won't do it.
It's hard, but a lot of folks want to do this. And imagine if they had childcare, help with their mortgage, just for while they're campaigning, so they can actually represent the people who have their shared lived experiences.
Yeah, we'd have a much more representative democracy that way.
Seriously.
Representative Francesca Hong, thanks so much for being our guest today on Mornings with Pat Kreitlow. Angela Lang and I will be right back with Dave Zirin, the sports columnist for The Progressive and The Nation.
Yes, thank you all so much for having me. It's so good to see you.